Paul Rieckhoff here with more. The host of the Independent Americans podcast joins us now. And before we get into Hegseth, the second strike, and all that surrounds that, Paul, your thoughts on the threat of land strikes in Venezuela?
I think this is the most important story in America. It's the most important story in the world because Trump continues to move forward with the most powerful military the world has ever seen without any consultation or approval from Congress. I mean, if you liked Afghanistan and you liked Iraq, this will be more of the same. We haven't obviously had a formal declaration of war since World War II, but that's not how it's supposed to go. If he strikes on land in Venezuela, the Venezuelans will consider it war, the world will consider it war, and I think most Americans will consider it war. And so far, Trump has been all gas and no brakes, and this is coming to a very important loggerheads, while at the same time, his Secretary of Defense is under tremendous scrutiny. The Signalgate report is out. There are allegations of war crimes, and a lot of people, frankly, don't have any confidence in the Secretary of Defense. So not a great idea to go to war without Congress behind you, and definitely not a great idea to do it when your Secretary of Defense is under so much controversy.
All right, let's talk about Hegseth. You're referencing the Signalgate report that many members of Congress have seen, or sources have reported through Joe Khalil about, the contents of that report, among other things saying that, Hegseth could have endangered our own troops with these signal messages on the signal system. And then in terms of the second strike, here's what the Secretary said yesterday when he was asked about this second strike on the alleged drug boats going after survivors and his, involvement or lack thereof. Here's what he said.
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war. This is what you in the press don't understand.
Okay. On both, what would you say?
Signalgate needed to come back around. This is really important because it's about accountability, and it's about whether or not the Secretary of Defense has different, lower standards for himself than every other member of the military. Because if any other member of the military shared classified or confidential information on Signalgate, they'd be, crucified under the UCMJ, and they'd be in a jail cell right now. So if he did disclose any kind of information that could have gotten anyone killed, he should resign, he should be impeached, and that should be bipartisan. There should be no quibbling about that. When it comes to his allegations about the fog of war, I understand the fog of war. I've been in war. And what I want to know is, why did he leave the briefing room in the middle of the strike? He said he wasn't there for when the double tap potentially happened and killed the remaining survivors. Where did he go that was more important than being in a room when American lives were in danger engaging in combat? I think that's a very important question for senators from both parties to be asking him.
Said he went to another meeting, and it was Admiral Bradley who gave the order. Wouldn't it be, though, if he said what he's alleged in the Washington Post to have said, which is essentially kill everybody, that have been his order, no matter whether he was there or not?
Yeah, the buck stops with him, and that's normally what a Secretary of Defense says. They usually take responsibility for everything that happens and everything that fails to happen. That's what a good leader does. And the nuance in his language, saying it was Admiral Bradley's call, is passing the buck. That's what it is. And I think any objective folks can see that. I think folks in our military see it. I think, frankly, it's cowardly. Admiral Bradley is also responsible for his decisions. He has an obligation, if he thinks that's a war crime, not to execute that order. But we need a full investigation of everybody in the chain of command around that incident, from the Secretary of Defense all the way down to the individuals who are involved in the strike. This is very, very important. It's about our honor. It's about war crimes. It's about the sacred trust we have, not just with our allies, but with the people we command. And they have to have confidence in their admirals, and they have to have confidence in their Secretary of Defense and in their president to understand the difference between an illegal order and an illegal one.
One other quick thing on this particular topic. What about Hegseth's history in terms of rules of engagement? I have on the tablet some of the reporting of the Wall Street Journal on this story this morning. They talked about how he'd really come to Trump's attention, arguing in favor or in the defense of troops who'd been accused of wrongdoing. But you also look at this podcast comment from last year saying rules of engagement are, quote, a huge problem. And then we know about some of the recent developments. I know probably your time when you knew Hegseth personally goes back to some of these, even before that, right, when you were both advocating for veterans, albeit from, I guess, different political perspectives. But what would you say about his history on all this?
He sounds like a guy who doesn't want to follow the rules. and the rules are in place for a reason. And until Congress or someone else changes the rules of war and changes the Geneva Convention, every single person in the military understands that double tapping is a war crime. And to break it down for folks beyond these boats, anybody who's seen a war movie knows you don't shoot and kill wounded. And that's what potentially happened here. And if that's what happened, there is no excuse for it. It is un-American. It is also something that makes our enemy fight harder if they think that they won't be captured and treated respectfully. And also, a really important point here, Connell, there is intelligence value in these two people who are potentially wounded. If they were dangerous enough to kill, they should have been dangerous enough to capture, bring back, and question for what they know.
Okay. All right, again, we're waiting for the president live. It's a different topic. I'm sure he'll be asked about some of this. He almost always takes questions at these events. Let me shift gears for a moment. Did you think it was interesting today that the president of the United States has chosen to pardon a Democrat? You know, Henry Cuellar of Texas, middle-of-the-road guy's been on this show many times, was indicted, corruption charges. Trump pardons him. Cuellar says he didn't see it coming, didn't know anything about it, and will still run for re-election as a Democrat. Here's what he said earlier.
Does that mean that you're running as a Democrat? Can you just be clear? Are you running as a Democrat?
As I said, nothing has changed. I'm a conservative Democrat, and I am very bipartisan, and I work with my Republican friends.
Here you go, works with his Republican friend, says he's from a conservative district. What do you make of this in the middle of everything else we're talking about?
I mean, I have a major problem with Trump pardoning criminals of any political party. I mean, this is so widespread at this point, including him, you know, former drug traffickers, the January 6th conspirators who were actually tried of seditious conspiracy, radicals like the Oath Keepers. You know, recently he accused Senator Kelly of sedition and said he's punishable by death. Sedition's actually not punishable by death. We know because Stuart Rhodes was convicted of it and sentenced to 18 years in prison. So these blanket pardons of all kinds of criminals just doesn't sit well with me, and I think with most Americans. If you're going to be tough on crime, why are you pardoning so many criminals of all backgrounds?
Yeah, it's almost like anyone who's accused of something, you know, it seems so like an identification with that person. I mean, the drug trafficking ex-president of Honduras raised a lot of eyebrows. I mean, even from Republicans and others are still trying to get answers from people like, why would we pardon this guy? Different maybe than Cuellar, but now here's a Democrat, and Trump says, well, he was unjustly accused. So there seems to be some sort of an idea of, hey, they were out to get me, wasn't fair, so I'm seeing that other places.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you and I talk a lot about where the middle is in this country, the folks who aren't hardcore Democrats and Republicans, which is the majority of this country. And I think they respect the rule of law, whether it's in the military or in the civilian judicial system. The rule of law is a foundational element of our society. And when the president continues to blow through it and pardon people who've been convicted by a jury of their peers, it's un-American. So I think it's unpopular. I think it will impact him and his party in the midterms. And I think it's just flat out wrong.
All right, Paul, as always, thank you. The Independent Americans podcast. I think you have Angus King on the latest episode, right? On that.
I do. So. He's on the Armed Services Committee, and he's in the middle of all this. He's one of the many senators that's going to see the Signalgate report, and he could be an important voice, too, as an independent who might be able to bring bipartisan unity around things like a War Powers Act if he does decide to strike against Venezuela. So Angus King is a guy definitely to watch.
Worth looking up wherever you get your podcasts, as we always say. Thank you, Paul. We'll talk to you again next week. Paul Rieckhoff.